Hi, morning. Okay, so Samir nicely setting this up. Um, I think there were very few people who would actually do the keynote. So thank you for putting me up on stage first. But I did the same. I actually asked the AI what should be the agenda and what should I be covering if I was doing the keynote speaker today. And what I thought I'll do is at least ground this conversation because, I'm trying to at least get the conversation going because AI is obviously a lot more than ChatGPT, especially GPT-4 that got launched in September tells me that no longer I need to think about telling my wife what to cook. Just take a picture of what's there in the refrigerator and say you want to cook something with 200 calories and the AI should tell you what can be cooked. So that makes life easier. But what I wanted to achieve today, and hopefully that will set the context for the rest of the day, is just ground the conversation because there are different set of practitioners in this room, leaders, folks who are in the whole journey over here. So what is the concepts that we should be thinking about when we talk about Gen AI implementation? And what sort of roadmap that typically I see when I work with CXOs that is getting discussed in the boardroom, right? So how do I make this session more Gen AI for all? So let's look at it that way. Hopefully by the end of this session, most of us should be in a similar plane of having a conversation in terms of thinking about Gen AI. So what's Gen AI and why now? So I think, and again, a lot of these slides have been spoken about and talked about, but Gen AI is really a part of artificial intelligence that is focused a lot more on generative. So the world started with artificial intelligence wanting to mimic human-like behavior. Then we went into machine learning, which was saying, if I feed in a set of data and I can do it on my laptop, on my computer, can I generate patterns and can I predict the next possible event? Then we went into neural networks using deep learning. I could still use a machine or two, but I feed them a bit more information. And that's when, over a period of time, when the compute started increasing, the data started being made available, we went into Gen AI. Now, most of the conversations are around whether it will bring in efficiency, whether banks see productivity around the use of Gen AI, and there are several surveys that are being done, and some of the results are there in front of you. But the simple answer is there are clear conversations that are happening in terms of how organizations are thinking about moving a step forward and what sort of use cases you are thinking when you look at Gen AI from an implementation perspective. So why now? I think first things that's changed is over the last few years, a lot of data is now made available. Large data sets are made available. And when large data is made available, you can start pushing that data and start using it for training. So earlier, the data was not that much data that is available now. So that's number one. Second, the models on which you build the LLMs or the large language models, and we'll come to that, have become a lot more sophisticated. And we all have been using Gen AI, by the way. So if you have your phone and you're using Google Translate, or if you're using Siri, that's all Gen AI. But earlier, you couldn't go on Google and say, can I see the code for Siri? But now, with Hugging Face and several other tools, a lot of open source models are available for us to build Gen AI on. Third, with cloud and otherwise, the computation, or what we call as GPU, or graphical processing unit, that's also made available. So with those three components in place, there is a lot of information, data, and processing power, which allows us to build large language models or Gen AI for our day-to-day purpose. So the time has moved very quickly for organizations to use it, not just large organizations. And that's where the moment of ChatGPT came in. So what are some of the concepts that we should bear in mind when we think about our Gen AI journey? You will hear this word quite a bit, which is LLM. So what's LLM or a large language model and what can it do, right? So there is beyond just summarizing text, and which is what you would have seen in a chat GPT, a simple use case to say, can I put in the whole policy or a procedure of an organization and can it summarize it to say what are the key actionables? Can I do classification to say if I get an email, can I do a classification to say whether it is a complaint, whether it is a concern, whether it is a query, what side of sentiment can I get? So there is a lot of activities that an LLM can do. Now, what exactly are these LLMs? Now, and you will hear these words quite interchangeably, LLM and foundational models. So the larger universe within Gen AI is foundational models. These foundational models are really trained on huge, I mean petabytes of data. And then you can technically use them for your own purpose, or you can, I'll keep using the word, you can fine tune them for your own use case. So let's say if you want to use them for servicing, let's say you want to use them for a legal purpose, then you start fine tuning them for a very particular use case. These are trained using a lot of data in a very unsupervised manner. So like human, you are telling them, take all this data and you've built models over a period of time and they've become smarter and efficient. Start reading these data and start learning from it. And over a period of time, this data, you start forming patterns. And that's what these foundational models. So think about foundational models as a vanilla cake, which is a normal cake. Now you can make a red velvet out of it, you can make a chocolate cake out of it, but the base will be the pure vanilla cake. So these foundational models can really do, and ChatGPT-4 is a great example because folks who have seen the demo of ChatGPT-4, you can actually tell the LLM to say, sing a lullaby or tell me a story about a character X in a world of Y in future and tell it in a comic manner, and the computer will start narrating the story to you. So you are giving a text prompt or you are giving a voice prompt and the computer will start talking back to you in a voice prompt. Or you can tell the computer saying, take a look at my refrigerator, here is a picture, tell me what can I cook with all the ingredients that's out there. So these are called foundational models which have the general capability to do, and that's why you will hear the word multimodal. Multimodal is essentially, it can, you can converse to it in text to text, text to voice, voice to text, and so on and so forth, all permutation combinations. So you have multiple models at which you can communicate. Vis-a-vis ChatGPT 3.5 or 3, where you would give what you will always use the word called prompt. Prompt is nothing but giving an indication of what do you expect back. And this is an interesting one where over a period of time, this is going to be a profession itself, saying how do you write English to get the most out of a large language model tool. So how do you writing English so that you can tell the computer what exactly you need and how you need is something that will become a profession in itself. So foundation model is a large universe, and then obviously a subset of this, which is LLM, which is predominantly focused on text, massive amount of text data that sort of goes into it, so that all grammar, syntax, ability to talk, ability to converse, ability to understand is what your LLM sort of generates. So this is something to bear in mind because this is the heart at which a lot of the conversations will happen, because every organization will end up building a series of LLMs to do a variety of tasks, and that's where you will have to make a decision to say what is the problem that you are solving, and for that particular problem, what is the LLM that you will generate, because everything will involve cost, everything will involve data, and because I mentioned training, so how will you give data to the computer, how will you fine tune the model, and these are all considerations you will have to bear in mind as you start thinking about LLMs. So just to make sure we are all clear on the concept of fine tuning, which is really most of the time, fine tuning is as simple as making the model fit for your purpose. So let's say, for example, you have ChatGPT. How do you make sure you use it for customer service? How do you make sure you use it for finance? And that's where you take a largely built model or LLM and then start giving your company specific information to train it for your particular purposes. So again, just putting that concept out there that there is a foundation model that is built on a lot of information, and then you fine tune it for your own purpose, and that's sort of fine tuning. So I'm just leaving some of the concepts out there so that everyone is on the same page. Moving forward, now how do you think about the various LLMs? Because all organizations who are doing this obviously are doing it for commercial purposes, and there is a variety of options out there, and I'll spend some more time over here. One is a very commercial or a proprietary model. So what you see, which is ChatGPT 4, 3.5, these are API-driven LLMs where they say, we've done all the training, we have got access to all the data, all you need to do is, so we've built the LLM because this is expensive. We've built the models as well, we've built the LLMs, we'll give it to you, we'll host it, and through API, you will start using it for your own purposes. Obviously, so it's a lot more easier, faster to deploy. You can try and use and do use cases to see whether it works, it doesn't work, etc. Obviously, there are concerns or challenges. Challenges around privacy, challenges around where the data will be stored. Because let's say if you're going to train that model, are you going to input your organizational data? Is there any customer data that you need to think about? And how do you manage privacy from that perspective? So that's something to bear in mind, which is what you see as a commercial or a proprietary model which is built by some of the large companies. Also, you need to think about the cost, because every time you ping and you keep hearing the word token, it is nothing but simple as the way the information is exchanged. How do you make sure that the price at which you are paying, and right now it's expensive, while I know they will come up with an India pricing for everything, it is a very expensive affair in terms of how do you sort of do this. Then there is a hybrid version where you say, I don't think we can afford to lose all our data or lose our proprietary data to train the model. Let's build something on the cloud where we create a private cloud for our company, host the LLM, and use it for a very specific use case. So this is a hybrid model where you're using a third-party foundational model that we spoke about, hosting it in your environment, and then putting it your proprietary data for fine-tuning or for a specific use cases. So it's a combination of best of both, where your compute and storage you are sort of using on an expandable capacity, but the proprietary data is sort of not leaving your organization and you're keeping over there. And then there is the last use case, which is fully parameterized, fit for your own purpose, where you are building it for your own self and not wanting to give anything out away. Now, obviously, it takes time to do this, but there are a lot of things like Databricks, Dolly and Hugging Face, where these models are available. These are smaller models, but very proprietary for your own purposes. So the training, the fine tuning is all your own data by which you are sort of using them for your own purposes. But you need to have the right skills, you need to have the right techniques, you need to make sure it is trained well, it is not hallucinating, so making sure all the checks and balances are. And now from what I see from the CXOs, most of them are sort of thinking between hybrid and full parameterization, depending on what their strategy is, what is the use case, and where they want to keep their proprietary data. And why this is important, because if you think about GCCs or if you think about enterprises, bulk of the effort will end up happening here, because you will start creating a variety of LLMs depending on the use case, and a significant amount of role will be played in terms of how the data gets trained, gets fine-tuned, and the ongoing monitoring so that the models do not hallucinate. And most importantly, how the risk management will happen. And I do anticipate large Gen AI COEs being set up here who will end up doing this on a more large-scale basis. Now, each of these obviously has its pros and cons, and I covered this a bit, but this gives you a sense in terms of the attractiveness. Proprietary data where you can make and have more control, whereas the deployment and the speed will obviously change depending on what sort of models and what sort of approaches you use. So again, something for you to bear in mind as you think about the strategy. As I said, this will take a good amount of your time. And I do want to spend time on this, which is called as chaining as a concept, or because again, I wanted to make sure some concepts remain with everyone. You could have a situation, LLM is not one sort of bulb in an organization which will light the world. You will end up creating multiple of those depending on situations. So, think about a scenario where you get a complaint from a multinational company, you get a complaint in German about the quality of product, right? So you will have a situation where, because you've trained everything in English, you will have a situation where you will first use an LLM or a model to translate from German to English. Then you will have another model to summarize what the complaint is. Then you will have a third model to say now what the sentiment is, and and then what should be the customized response by another model, and then retranslate it back to German so that you can send it back to the customer. Now imagine a chain of 4 or 5 LLMs that will work together. And that's where the concept of auto GPT and LangChains will come in. Again, I'm just leaving some thoughts with you because you will spend the entire day thinking about this. How do you chain, because you're not going to come back to say now translation is done, do something else. Now something is done, now do something else. No, the whole thing is going to be chained. And that's where multiple LLMs, depending on the use case. So for example, translation. Bloom has an excellent translation tool. So you might end up using Bloom only for translation. Summarization, you might be using BART, assuming BART has a very good use case. But again, all of this will involve a cost, which is why every time you think about a cost and a use case, you need to think what is the cost you are going to spend for this, what is the ROI, and whether it makes sense. And that is again a big part when we'll come to the implementation roadmap. But again, I wanted to leave this thought with you so that you understand multiple LLMs, multiple use cases, and therefore multiple options to see how do you bring the whole thing together. Now, how do I start my AI journey? Assuming we are cool with the concepts, how do you sort of move forward? And this is what, at least I can tell you, with most CXOs, the conversation hovers around these 5 areas. One is the Gen AI strategy. Now, when I say Gen AI strategy, how are we going about this? Strategically, whether we want to create a center of excellence, whether we want to do this in a more democratized manner, whether we want to build a marketplace of LLMs and then sort of use it across the organization, or we want every department to think differently. These are all strategic questions that we need to think about. What are the drivers which will allow us where we make the decision? Is it going to be more outcome driven? Is it more saying here is where I improve experience? Is this where I'll save cost or efficiency? Again, how do we make sure there is governance around it? Second, what are our standards around the use of Gen AI and build of Gen AI? Very, very important, because you are going to be using a lot of internal data and feeding it on your LLM. How do you ensure that you are not taking any data which is customer driven or violating any privacy when you are building models? How do you make sure all the models that are built, there is clear trail and documentation around it? Then what is going to be your data and tech architecture? And how will that data and tech architecture work very closely with the various LLMs that you will build? Use case, I think everybody knows how do you build and prioritize the use case and sort of, I can tell you most organizations are thinking over the next 2 years, maximum if they can deliver 6 to 7 use cases, that is a lot. That is a lot. Because Once you deliver one use case, the applicability of that across a wider organization is humongous. And a lot of thinking goes, and a lot of technology is still evolving. So organizations are taking a very calibrated approach to say, let's do 4, let's do 3, let's do 4, 5 use cases and first get them right. And more about people, and I'll come to this in a bit more. So just let me spend time on some of these parts that I mentioned in the strategy. So one is use cases, right? So what are the drivers on which I decide the use cases? So is it productivity? Can I scale this? Will it improve customer experience? Will it help me manage my risks better? How do I prepare that data? Is it going to take me a lot of time? Is that data available? Are there better models that I can use? Take 2 more minutes. Models I can use. So these are the decisions from a use case perspective. From a data architecture, I do want to spend a minute on this. ML ops will become ML plus LLM ops. How do you prepare data for AI? How will you move this data in a very differentiated manner over a period of time? So how do you prepare data? How do you prepare AI? How do you serve data? And how do you serve AI in a coherent manner, which is an overall data strategy? Again, something to bear in mind, and I'm sure we should have more conversations around that, because this is going to be a big foundation around the whole piece. And more importantly, the whole data lineage and privacy that's going to come through. The next one is deciding the tech architecture, and as I was saying, there are various use cases. You have to think about the use case to decide what sort of tech architecture. Is it complex problem that you're solving? Is it a more difficult problem that you're solving? And again, just in the interest of time, there are various options. If you're solving a complex use case, a data is stored in a vector sort of a model, because ultimately, you want to make sure you're picking data as fast as possible, and latency, customer is not going to wait because if your chatbot is hallucinating. So your tech architecture strategy becomes extremely important. And risks, I do want to spend just last 1 minute on this. Standards are evolving and coming by the day on the overall risk management as far as Gen AI is concerned, be it around trust and accuracy, because let's say if you're building your own model, how do you make sure that the data over there is complete? How do you ensure the data is accurate? How do you make sure the data is not biased? You feed in the data and the customer thinks only, and it's only for a white male. Every time the conversation happens, the computer will react as if there is a white male on the other side. So how do you make sure there is fairness, there is no toxicity, and there are clear standards being developed? And similar to what you would do on the quantitative side, standards around model development and validation from a governance perspective. And how do you then start benchmarking the results vis-a-vis others? Again, I'm just leaving some of these thoughts so that as we go through the panel, we could have a more rounded conversation around some of these areas. So I'll leave everyone with this last slide, which is the 5-point roadmap. Don't complicate this. Think about strategy. Think about people, very importantly. How do you upskill and upgrade them? Think about the risks, very important, and the use cases and how they tie in with the overall data and tech strategy. So hopefully that makes sense, and at least a good basis or ground for the rest of the day. I hope it was not geeky enough, but and it makes at least for a layman to understand here. But again, thank you for the opportunity, and I think that's the end of it.